Hi, my name is Annick Odom, and I am the Artist-in-Residence this year at Fairmont State. I was born and raised in Morgantown, West Virginia, and I do all kinds of things. I am a musician. I play the double bass and the clarinet. That's what I trained to do. I also sing. I play fiddle. And as you might imagine, I also make some visual art. I make crankies. Crankies are moving panoramas that tell a story. Storytelling, I think, is a really central part of the art that I make. I, for a long time, considered myself a classical musician, and I really enjoy playing other people's music, but at a certain point in time, I decided that I was interested in getting to choose the stories that I told, and that kind of evolved into me wanting to tell my own stories and just thinking about storytelling and I guess kind of seeing value in your own story and in the stories of the place that you're from as being something I wanted to dive into. I think that also being a West Virginian, there are a lot of people who tell stories about us. There are also a lot of West Virginians who are telling their own stories, but at least for me as a kid, it wasn't something that I really was aware of. And so actually, when I decided to start diving into storytelling, one of the first people that I came across was Ruth Ann Music, who is very connected to Fairmont State. And she has a bunch of collections of stories. And I actually brought some here. I was living in the Netherlands. And so I had these books I remembered from West Virginia history class, this book, The Telltale Lilac Bush. And so I'm kind of a scaredy cat. And what I like about these books is that they have very short summaries, just like one little paragraph, 2 paragraphs that tell you scary stories, but you don't have to actually get scared when you read them. And so I started going through these, and I actually found some that I really liked and started to use those as the basis of some of the songs that I was writing. And I think that kind of through that and through going through archives, I found my own voice, actually. I think initially as someone who didn't create, but saw myself as an interpreter, that I still am really drawn to curating and to collecting and gathering, and kind of from that point of view, finding my own creativity. Some of the most meaningful pieces that I've written or share are things that I've collected and found. And I think it's also been a way for me to feel more connected to community. I think as a musician, a lot of the time that I spend making music is spent by myself and spent in my own head, or spent figuring out how to move different parts of my body at the right time and to the right place. And so connecting to storytelling for me meant connecting to community and getting to talk to people and learn about them. And also, like, through the community work that I started to do, I realized that a lot of folks kind of lose their own sense of creativity as they grow up. And I think that getting to work with other people and getting to kind of be a cheerleader for other folks and support them in their creativity, like no matter what level they take it to, or whether they're trying to perform it, or just if it's a jam and just playing the bass and being a supportive role so that someone can play a fiddle tune. For me, that's been really an important part of music making, and kind of, I think, actually finding the joy that I initially had as a kid playing music, and that maybe sometimes disappears when you're in school. I think kind of since I've been out of school, connecting to stories, connecting to community has been a really important and energizing aspect for me in my own creativity. Also, so my training initially as a kid and even as a young adult was playing classical music, playing in an orchestra. And so for a lot of my youth, I was really focused on getting out of the state. I wanted to be in Pittsburgh. That was like the dream. I wanted to drive to Pittsburgh, play in the youth symphony, and then who knows where else. But I think because of that, wasn't very aware of the wealth of music and tradition that exists in West Virginia. And So when I moved away, I think this happens to a lot of people. I, kind of got homesick and started looking at things that were West Virginian. And so through that, I found fiddle tunes. And being a classical bassist, I first started playing fiddle tunes on the bass and like really playing the melodies. And then I realized that was a lot of work. And no one really wanted me to do that. So even when I would spend hours trying to learn these fiddle tunes, I would show up to a jam and people were like, why do you have a bow out? Like, that's not your job as a bassist. So through that, I kind of picked up the fiddle, which I played violin as a kid. But for me, traditional music has become again, a way to kind of build community, to get to know people who you might not talk to on a daily basis, who have a very different understanding of the world than you, perhaps, who are also older or younger than you are. I think I've been really drawn into the intergenerational aspect of traditional music, of storytelling, of square dancing. I think also through playing fiddle, I got into square dancing, and now I'm a square dance caller. And I think that something I love about square dancing is that it's, I think, one of the few places that you can meet a total stranger and make a fool of yourself, and it's fine. Like everyone, the more the fool you are, I think the more laughter there is, and the better of a square dance it is. So I really enjoy that aspect. Also of kind of, you're not really striving, at least in my perspective, for perfection. You're just trying to have a good time, be respectful of others, and get to know other people, enjoy the music. And I think for me, a jam is also that way. I'm not really, I think as a classical bassist, there's really an expectation that you know exactly what you're going to play. You practice really hard. You show up to the gig and it's perfect or near perfect. And if you fail, it feels like failure. And I think playing folk music has been, for me as a musician and just as a kind of perfectionist human, a really healthy thing to not know what's coming and to know that it's fine if you mess it up. That like even the best musicians that I know are willing to either mess up a couple times through or sit it out for a little bit and then, jump in on a tune they don't know. And there's not really a performative aspect of that jam. I think it for me has been a really cool way to meet other people, to be okay with making a fool of myself, and actually to get a lot better at skills that I think serve me even as a classical musician, to kind of be more embodied when I'm playing and feel more of a connection to the instrument rather than like to a piece of paper that then is coming back to the instrument. So that, and maybe the last thing I think about when I think about traditional music is that I feel like it's really inclusive to a lot of different styles of playing and a lot of different like people who have different levels or different goals. Like some people, they might never practice at home and they're not trying to play the tune. They just want to hang out. And I think that's really cool that there's a space that you can be really bad at your instrument maybe, but just have a great time. And that those same people can sit in the same circle as someone, who maybe spends all of their hours eating, breathing, dreaming fiddle and knows every tune inside and out. I think it's cool that there's so like kind of a scaffolding of levels that someone who's a beginner can show up and kind of already jump in a little bit. And I really love that Fairmont State has a jam that's happening every month. And it's cool to see, I've been to the jam on Fridays. I think it's the last Friday of every month. And it's cool to just meet people in the community that I would never run into otherwise. This spring, I'm going to be teaching a quote-unquote masterclass. I'm really hoping that students from all kinds of different backgrounds are going to sign up for it, not just visual artists, but maybe someone who's never considered themselves creative before, but loves history, or someone who loves machines, someone who loves singing or telling stories, or who thinks that they're pretty funny and could tell a good joke. Any kind of person, I would welcome you to come take this class. We're going to be making crankies, which are these objects that are behind me, and I am really excited because I'm hoping that there'll be collaborative crankies. I think something that I love about making crankies is that everyone can kind of take their own skill set and also dive into something that they maybe haven't tried before in a supportive environment. The one I'm hoping we'll use is this really giant cranky that's back here, and it would be a pretty gargantuan task for one student to make a cranky out of that. So I think, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 people working on one cranky. It's really cool to see what you can make when you work together, and when different ideas come together and kind of compromises are made, new ideas are formed. But yeah, I'm hoping that we'll look at some oral histories that are gathered in Fairmont, and they may be from all kinds of folks. If you have other stories that you're interested in working with, that would also be welcome. I'm hoping we'll dive into the archives at the Folklife Center and then come up with a couple of different crankies that we can share at the end of the year. Crankies are moving panoramas. They're long scrolls like this. They can be made out of all kinds of things. They can be made out of paper, out of a material called Tyvek, which is kind of a plasticky material, out of fabric. And they were used a long time ago. I think of them kind of as, like old movies. But they were repopularized by a puppet company in Vermont called Bread and Puppet Theater Company. And they were started to be called crankies then because of the crank mechanism, the turning mechanism. And because they kind of were popularized by this theater company, there's a lot of music that's played with them, a lot of puppetry can be done with them. I really enjoy them because they're a way to kind of what I like is that you can either tell the same story that you're singing or that you're telling, or the way I first got into them was I was interested in kind of a way to tell multiple stories. I sing a lot of songs that are older, and that sometimes I wonder for myself, if I really like the song, or there's sometimes aspects of it, like for instance, murder ballads. There's some that are pretty violent towards women, and they're beautiful songs. They have a strong history, but I don't always love the kind of the actual story itself. And so the first cranky that I made was with a friend, Sarah Schwendeman, who's the visual artist, and we really spent time trying to figure out, like, how could we not change the words, but tell the story of this really upbeat, exciting murder ballad that usually is played at bluegrass jams at a really fast tempo. How could we tell the narrative from the woman's perspective, or at least kind of cast some doubt onto the narrative that's being told by the man? So for me, like, they're a really cool way to get folks to dive into this kind of magical world of these really long old ballads that sometimes feel too long if you're just singing them without anything to kind of pull an audience in. And they're also a way to recontextualize songs or to help. I lived in the Netherlands for a long time, and so having a cranky felt like also a way to sing songs that were in English that maybe were difficult for folks who spoke English as a second language, even if they spoke it really well. Having a visual was kind of a helpful way to get people to not be stressed out about all the words that I was singing to them. But yeah, they're made usually in one big piece, and then sometimes they're taped together, or like put together depending on what kind of material you're working with. But usually you kind of think of each panel as being one part of the story, and then you just kind of linearly tell the story through the artwork.